Coming up, Julius Randle's career night, not enough to beat the Timberwolves, and the Mavericks find a new way to lose. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You were listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA, local experts joining us to go over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. An out-of-this-world performance from Julius Randle last night, 57 points. But that showing was spoiled with a loss as the Timberwolves held on for the 140-134 win. Locked On Timberwolves and Locked On Knicks are in for more on a good one at MSG.
The Minnesota Timberwolves went into Madison Square Garden and allowed Julius Randle to score 57 points against them, but still won in a massive victory for the Wolves over the Knicks. I'm Ben Beacon, host of the Locked On Wolves podcast. And despite Julius Randle's 57, the Wolves got 35 from Taurean Prince in the starting lineup and placed the injured Anthony Edwards. After a pair of rough performances over the weekend, Prince came up huge in this game, scoring 35, had 20 in the first half, 8 of 8 overall from outside the arc, 12 of 13 for the game total from the floor. The Wolves also got 24-11 from Mike Conley, 14 off the bench from Jalen Noel, who returned after missing the last 10 games for the Wolves. This was all offense all the time. The Wolves shot 77% from beyond the arc in the first half, finished shooting 58% from three and 61% from the floor. But late in the game, the Wolves were able to slow down Randle, play defense against the Knicks, actually. It was a novel concept, did some damage in transition, got some big steals, and came away with the win. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Timberwolves.
Randle's 57 points are not enough as the Knicks fall 140-134 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm Gavin Shaw of the Locked On Knicks podcast. The New York Knicks gave up 79 points in the first half. They played probably their worst defensive game of the year, certainly their worst defensive game in the last few months. And it almost didn't matter because Julius Randle was just that electric, banging home 8 threes, dominating in the mid-range, flushing home shots at the rim. It was an all-out, incredible career night for Julius, but late in the game, it was Taurean Prince, it was Mike Conley, it was Kyle Anderson grabbing clutch rebounds, and the Timberwolves on a night where they, as a team, couldn't miss, just made a couple more shots late, and the Knicks weren't totally cohesive offensively as Randle faded a bit down the stretch of this basketball game. Just one of those nights where the Knicks maybe thought they had a little bit more margin for error than they actually.
An absolute meltdown in the fourth quarter last night spelled disaster for Dallas on the road in Memphis. Locked On Mavs host is almost speechless, while Locked On Grizzlies is hoping that this win is a sign of things to come.
What just happened? Nick Angstad from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here, still trying to process what I just witnessed with this Dallas Mavericks team. Another confounding loss that makes no sense. No Luka Doncic for the Dallas Mavericks. Kyrie Irving back, though. Dallas Mavericks built up a 16-point lead and then just completely give it away. Used to that. But the Mavericks scoring 12 points in the fourth quarter, not used to that. They really only scored 9 points for most of the fourth quarter until some last-minute free throw things here and there. Kyrie Irving went scoreless in the fourth quarter for the first time this whole season. This Dallas Mavericks team just didn't have an offense. They didn't run stuff. Jaden Hardy and Kyrie Irving getting their own buckets was kind of the only way they were getting shots. And when Kyrie Irving went cold, didn't score in the fourth quarter, the Mavericks had nothing to go to. They had no go-to plays. They had nothing figured out. And the Memphis Grizzlies came back after all the weird stuff that happened to them, found a way to win. And the Dallas Mavericks, again, found a way to lose.
What a win for the Memphis Grizzlies. Another come-from-behind victory, down double digits entering the fourth quarter. Do you feel that? Do you feel that? Could that be the immaculate vibes returning? It's not just Ja Morant coming back into the fold. Maybe things are starting to look up for the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies, and the Grizzlies were not doing particularly well going into the fourth quarter, down double digits. The third quarter is usually where Memphis does their damage. Kudos to the Mavericks. They beat the Grizzlies at their own game through 3 quarters, getting to the basket, being aggressive in the paint. But it was because of the unlikely other guys, the Luke Kennards, the David Roddies, the Santi Aldamas with a massive double-double off the bench, the John Conchars. I have to praise John Conchar. Kudos to him for a remarkable performance in that fourth quarter to help the Grizzlies get back in the game. A major win with Ja Morant back in the building. The vibes, they're coming back.
Coming up, the Jazz are refusing to tank the Kings, their latest target. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA. March Madness is heating up now. It's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, super easy for you to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes that are drained. Looking ahead to NBA games tonight, I always love to go with the underdog, and while the Kings did lose to the Jazz yesterday, they're taking on the Celtics, and I think they might have a pretty good chance at home. So you can take that bet. Also, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back. Thank you for making Locked On Game to Game your first listen every single weekday. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. A shorthanded Utah team did not concede against Sacramento. They eventually got a win at home. Locked On Jazz joins us to detail how Utah got the job done.
The Utah Jazz simply won't go away, and anyone who wants to say they're tanking, they're not playing along with your script. Because tonight, without Lauri Markkanen, without Colin Sexton, without Jordan Clarkson, the Jazz faced one of the hottest teams in the NBA, the Sacramento Kings, who have won 11 of 13. And the Jazz jumped out to a 40-19 lead at the end of one, led by 16 at the half. Sacramento came back, tied it as we entered the fourth quarter, and as everyone expected, the #1 clutch team in the league, the Sacramento Kings, did not pull away and win the game. With a closing lineup of Chris Dunn, Simone Fontecchio, Ochai Agbaji, Kelly Olynyk, and Walker Kessler, 3 rookies and a guy that was signed on a 10-day contract, the Utah Jazz closed on a 15-5 run to defeat the Sacramento Kings, their first loss in 8 road games, and the Jazz moved to 35-36 on the season, and they are now above 500 since the trade deadline.
The Pacers blow what should have been an easy win in Charlotte last night. Locked On Pacers has more on a game that Indiana could and should have won.
Pacers blow a winnable game against the Charlotte Hornets on the road. 115-109. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, and the score does little to tell the story of this game for the Pacers, who dominated the first quarter 40-22. They're up 21 in the middle of the second quarter, led by just 8 at halftime, gave the lead in the third, and yet still had a chance, up 9 with 5 minutes to go, and still gave it away. 16-2 run by the Hornets over a 4-minute stretch late in the fourth quarter to get this game done. Pacers really needed this one. Game and a half out of the plan entering the day. They lose to Charlotte, a lowly Hornets team, while the Bulls beat the Sixers in Philly. Really tough night for the Pacers on the court. They blow a big lead. They turn it over 21 times, and a bad night for the Pacers in the standings as the Bulls create some separation. We'll cover it all on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
That's a wrap for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast, both on YouTube and wherever else that you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.